All right. So this is chapter 4, The First Worm. The huge night crawler sprawled limply in the center of the platter, brown and steaming. Boiled, Tom said. We boiled it. Billy stormed about the barn, kicking barrels and posts, arguing, a night crawler isn't a worm. If it was a worm, it'd be called a worm. A night crawler is a night crawler. Finally, Joe ran off to get his father's dictionary. Night crawler is an earthworm, especially a large earthworm found on the soil surface at night. Billy kicked a barrel. It still wasn't fair. He didn't care what the dictionary said. Everybody knew the difference between a night crawler and a worm. Look at that thing. It was as big as a souvenir pencil from the Empire State Building. Ugh. He poked it with his finger. Alan said they'd agreed right at the start that he and Joe could choose the worms. If Billy was going to cheat, the bet was off. He got up and started for the door. He guessed he had other things to do besides argue all day with the Fink. So Tom took Billy aside into the horse stall and put his arms around Billy's shoulders and talked to him about George Cunningham's brother's mini bike and how they could ride it on a trail under the power lines behind Hodell's farm, up and down the hills, bounding over rocks, rum. Sure, it was a big worm, but it'd only be a couple of bites. Did he really want to lose a mini bike over 2 bites? Slop enough mustard and ketchup and horseradish on it, and he wouldn't even taste it. Yeah, said Billy, I probably could eat this one, but I got to eat 15. Well, you can't quit now. Look at them. He nodded at Alan and Joe, waiting beside the orange crates. They'll tell everybody you were chicken, and it'll be all over school. Come on. That's called peer pressure. They led Billy back to the orange crates, sat him down, tied a napkin around his neck. Alan gave him a knife and a fork. Would you like to eat carved lengthwise or crustwise? Ketchup, asked Joe, showing his teeth. Cut it out, said Tom. Here. He glopped ketchup and mustard and horseradish on the night crawler, squeezed a few drops of lemon juice and salt and peppered it. Billy closed his eyes and opened his mouth. Oh, Wooten. They're talking weird. Tom sliced off the end of the night crawler and forked it up. But just as he was about to poke it into Billy's open mouth, Billy closed his mouth and opened his eyes. No, let me do it. Tom handed him the fork. Billy gazed at the dripping ketchup and mustard, thinking, oh, it's all right about talking about eating worms, but doing it? Tom whispered in his ear, mini bike. Glug. Billy poked the fork into his mouth, chewed furiously, gulped. His eyes crossed, swam, and squinted shut. He flapped his arms wildly, then he opened his eyes and grinned beautifully up at Tom. Superb, Gaston. Tom cut another piece, ketchuped, mustarded, salted, peppered, horseradished, and lemoned it, and handed the fork over to Billy. Billy slugged it down, smacking his lips, and so they proceeded, now sprinkling on cinnamon and sugar or a bit of cheese and some cracker crumbs or Worcestershire sauce until there was nothing on the plate but a few stray dabs of ketchup and mustard. Well, said Billy, standing up and wiping his mouth with the napkin. So, wie are done mit the first course. Now seconds? Let me look in your mouth, said Alan. Yeah, said Joe. See if you swallowed it. Certainly, said Billy. Look as long as you want. Okay, can they stop talking like this? Alan and Joe scrutinized the inside of his mouth. Okay, said Tom. Leave him alone. Come on, 1 down, 14 to go. Well, how'd it taste? Asked Alan. Good. Very fine. Hoo-hoo. He flapped his arms like a big bird and began to hop around the barn, crying, Good, very fine. Alan, Joe, and Tom looked worried. Yeah. How are you feeling, Billy? Tom asked. Stop flapping around and come tell us how you're feeling, said Joe. They huddled together by the orange crates as Billy hopped around, flapping his arms. Alan whispered, He's crackers. Joe edged towards the door. Don't let him see we're afraid. Crazy people are like dogs. If they see you're afraid, they'll attack. What couldn't be? Tom whispered, standing his ground. 1 worm. Billy screeched, hopping higher and higher, drooling from his mouth. Come on, whispered Joe and Tom. Hey, Billy, burst out Tom suddenly in a hearty, quavering voice. Cut it out, will you? I want to ask you something. Billy's arms flapped slower. He tiptoed around Tom, his head cocked to one side, his cheeks puffed out. Tom hugged himself, chuckling nervously. Cut it out, will you, Billy? Billy pounced. Joe and Adam fled, the barn door banging behind him. Billy rolled on the floor, helpless with laughter. Tom clambered up, brushing himself off. Did you see their faces? Billy said, laughing. Climbing over each other out the door. Oh, geez. Joe was pale as an onion. Yeah, said Tom. Ha ha, you fooled them. Oh, geez. Billy sat up. Then he crawled over to the door, peered out through the knothole. Look at them, peeking up over the stone wall. Watch this. The door swung open slowly. Screeching, Billy hopped up onto the doorsill, into the yard, and up onto a stump, splashed into a puddle, flapping his arms, rolling his head. Alan and Joe galloped up the hill through the high grass, yelling, "Here he comes! Get out of the way!" And then Billy stopped hopping and, climbing up on the stump, called out in a shrill, girlish voice, "Oh, boys, where are you going? I'd something tear you, ittle boys." What? Alan and Joe stopped and looked back. "I do going home, ittle boys?" Yeah, Billy. I really am over this. Who scared you, lunk? Called Alan. Yes, yelled Joe. I guess I can go home without being called scared if I want to. I just remembered I was supposed to help my mother wash the windows this afternoon, said Alan. That's all. He turned and he started up the meadow, his hands in his pockets. Yeah, said Joe. Me too. And he trudged after Alan. Chapter 5. Alan and Joe stopped in the orchard by the pile of fresh dirt. You think he'll be able to do it? Asked Alan. I don't know, said Joe. He can't do it, said Alan. How could anybody eat 15 worms? My father will kill me. $50? He ate that one awful easy. Forget it, said Joe. If he doesn't give up himself, I'll figure something out. We could spike the next one with pepper. He'd eat one piece and then another, and talking to Tom, and then all of a sudden he'd sneeze, and he'd sneeze again and sneeze again. A faint look of panic would creep over his face, and he's beginning to wonder if he'll ever stop. He clutches his stomach, his eyes begin to water. Billy's awful stubborn, said Alan. Even if it was killing him, he might not give up. He falls to the floor. I bend over him. Call his mother. It's the troglodycrosis. His eyes bleed up at me. Ka-chum! Remember that business last summer, said Alan, when it was 95 degrees in the shade and I dared him to put all his winter clothes in Father's raccoon coat and his ski boots and walk up and down Main Street all afternoon? They went off through the orchard, Joe sneezing, sighing, rolling his eyes, pretending to be Billy suffering from a dose of peppered worm. Alan moaning to himself about how stubborn Billy could be. $50? Chapter 6. Billy sighed. On the plate before him lay the last bite of worm under a dab of ketchup and mustard. What's the matter? Asked Tom. I don't know, sighed Billy. He picked up the fork again. Does it taste bad? No, said Billy. I mostly just taste ketchup and mustard, but it makes me feel sort of sick even before I eat it. Just thinking about it. He sighed again and then glanced at Joe and Adam talking to each other in whispers by the window. What are you talking about? Nothing. Then what are you whispering for? Nothing. It's not important. Just something Joe's father told him last night. What? Come on, finish up. It was nothing. We'll miss the cartoons. Billy shut his eyes and popped the last piece of worm in his mouth, chewed, gagged, clapped his hands over his mouth, gulp, gulp, topped backwards off the orange crate. Sprawling on his back in the chaff, he gazed peacefully up at the ceiling. Joe and Alan stood over him. Open up. Billy opened his mouth. Wider. See any, Joe? Nah, he swallowed it. All right, let's go. 7. And a picture. Not a picture. Can't really tell. Red Crash Helmets and White Jumpsuits is the title. What that has to do with it. Read this one and then stop for this video. After the movies, Tom walked home with Billy. Tomorrow I'll roll the crawler in cornmeal and fry it like a trout. It's not really the taste, said Billy. It's more the thought. When I start to eat it, even though it's smothered in ketchup and mustard and cheese, I can't stop thinking worm. Worm, 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 worm. Gaggles of worm and bait boxes, drowned worms drying up on sidewalks, a worm squirming as a fish hook gores into him, the soggy end of a worm dragging out a dead fish's mouth, Robin jenking worms out of the lawn. I can't stop thinking worms. Yeah, but if I fry it in cornmeal, it won't look like a crawler. I'll put parsley around it and slices of lemon, and you can concentrate and think fish. All the time you're waiting in the barn, all the time you're eating, and keep saying to yourself, fish, 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 fish. Here I am eating fish, good fish. Trout, salmon, flounder, perch. I'll ride my mini bike into church. Dace, tuna, haddock, and trout. Wait till you hear the minister shout. Fish, 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 fish. Shark, haddock, sucker, eel. I'll race my father in his automobile. Eel, flounder, bluegill, shark will race all day till after dark. Billy cheered up. Think how they'd all stare. I'd rev up the aisle, zip around the front pews, down the side aisle, under the stained glass windows. My parents would kill me. Reverend Yardard peered down over the Bible stand. William, he'd cry. William, you take that engine thing out of here this minute. Yeah, and then they'd come chasing after us, said Tom. Billy laughed, waving their arms and yelling, and then we'd lead the zigzag round and out the gravestones and monuments in the cemetery, then roar off down the Sandgate Road, leaving them draped over tombs, panting and shaking their fists. And that Monday, we'd smuggle it into class disguised as Raymond Dwelly because he's so fat, and hid it in the coat closet. And then when Millie Butler said anything at all, even something like, excuse me, or even if she sniffed, we'd dump a whole bottle of ink over her head and run for the coat closet, overturning chairs and desks behind us to slow up Miss Howard. She'd come after us, fuming and shouting threats, and suddenly the doors of the coat closet would slam open, and we'd roar on our mini bike in blood-red crash helmets and white jumpsuits, our scarves streaming out behind us, and we'd roar round and round the classroom while Miss Howard knelt among the overturned desks and chairs, sobbing helplessly in her hands. And then the rum of the door out the door and up the hall, thumbing our noses at the monitors. Brackety, brackety, brack up the stairs, stiff-arming tacklers into Mr. Simmons' office, up onto his desk, broom, broom, a backfire into his face. And zoom out the window as he topples backwards into his chair in a hurricane of quiz papers and report cards. And then crunch, landing on the driveway, we roar off down the highway to Bennington and join the Navy. So Mrs. Howard and Mr. Simmons and our parents can't punish us. Man, they have some imagination. All right, we will do the next video starting with chapter 8.